Professor Akram here, and in this lesson we are discussing the many different types of playtesting, as well as how and when to playtest. Testing is an essential part of any agile development, especially game production. Testing takes place during each sprint of agile development, and of all the types of testing, the playtest is by far the most important in player-centric design. Playtest test if the game is meeting the player's experience goals. The player experience goals relate to the player's motivation in the game and what the player will do and feel throughout the game. Playtests should help game designers answer certain questions about the game, such as, is it playable? Does it function as intended or as the player perceives it should? Is it enjoyable? Would players play it again? Does the players consider it fun? Is it challenging? Does it motivate players to complete? Is there a right amount of risk and reward? Is it engaging? Does it invoke a certain emotion and behavior in the player? Is it balanced? Are the outcomes perceived to be fair and consistent? Are there no unintended outcomes? Is it accessible? Are all the game elements understandable and complete? Remember, the game designer is not always part of the target market for the game, but regardless, they must be an advocate for the player. The player-centric design is all about the player. With that said, to properly playtest a game designers need to identify target players for the game. While it would be amazing to say that your game is intended for everyone, it is impossible to design for everyone. Instead, game designers need to identify a narrow representation of their ideal player, defining each of the 4 types of market segmentations, starting with demographics, which includes age, gender, income, location, education, and ethnicity. Psychographics, which are personality traits, values, attitudes, interests, lifestyles, and motivations. Behavioral traits, which include purchasing habits, spending habits, brand and platform interactions. And geographics, which include country, climate, urban, or rural. Each segmentation provides helpful information about your player and why they would or would not play your game. For example, if your game requires many in-game purchases to be able to level up, those from lower income families may be unable to continue playing the game long term. If your game portrays certain moral or values in contrast to the player, they may find it offensive. If the game is developed as a PC-only game, console players may not even consider trying it. Certain countries ban certain depictions in media. For example, in Germany, all depictions and imagery of the swastika is illegal. Thus, a World War II game, for instance, may have to be modified or just not sold in Germany. One method for game designers to help identify the ideal player is to create a persona. A persona in marketing is a fictional representation of an actual player. During the early stages of game production, a persona is prepared as a one-page description that identifies all market segmentation of the individual based on data gathered from actual people representing your target player. The persona will be used throughout the development to help the entire game production team make informed decisions when designing, building, and testing the game. Just as playtesting should take place during each sprint of the game production, there are different groups of playtesters. First off, we have self-testers. The game production team should playtest frequently and often. These playtests help to identify any major red flags before they become larger issues. However, these playtests may have biased results since those playtesting are the same individuals on the game production team. The next group of playtesters are friends and colleagues. Once the self-testing has been deemed sufficient, friends and colleagues should be asked to playtest. This will provide feedback from an unbiased or mostly unbiased opinion. These individuals are not always your target market, but can still provide vital feedback on issues before you share your game with your target market. The last group of playtesters is in fact your target market. To fully assess the potential success of your game, playtest with your target market is essential. These strangers should provide you with 100% unbiased feedback. Playtesting should take place as early as possible in the game production, starting with the physical prototype. Keep in mind, different groups of playtesters should be invited to playtest during different stages of the physical prototype development. For example, during step 1 of laying the foundation for your prototype, you should conduct self-testing. During step 2 of building the framework of your prototype, again, you're going to want to do some self-testing, but as the game evolves, you will bring in friends and colleagues to test the game. During step 3 of adding the finishings, this is when you're going to want to bring in your target market to test out the prototype. And again, during the refinement stage of prototyping, you're going to want to ask your target market to playtest a second time. Depending on the stage of the game production and the type of feedback data the game designer is seeking, different types of playtesting methods might be employed. There are many different ways to conduct playtest, each having its pros and cons. The most common methods of playtesting are through one-on-one. This is where the game designers observe and ask questions of each playtester as they play the game. This can provide insight into how the player plays the game, but can also be skewed if the players are nervous or distracted by the observation and questions. Group testing, similar to the one-on-one where you observe and ask questions, only this time you are observing a group of playtesters as they play through the game all at the same time and place. This can provide helpful observation data in a greater sum, but again, players may be uncomfortable or distracted during the observation and questioning process. Feedback forms. Here you have playtesters play through the game on their own and submit feedback through a survey. Quantitative data on the feedback forms rely on asking the right questions, while qualitative data depends on the articulation and willingness of the playtesters. Interviews are where you interview playtesters individually after they've played the game. Much like feedback forms, quantitative data depends on how the interview questions are asked, and qualitative data depends on how verbal the playtesters are. Open discussions, similar to interviews, but again with a large group of playtesters after they've played the game. Open discussions can stimulate conversation among playtesters in contrast to one-on-one interviews. However, there may be playtesters unwilling to share their opinions amongst a large group. Lastly, we have data hooks. Here we collect in-game data about the player's gameplay behaviors. Data hooks can collect a great amount of data on how the player unconsciously plays the game. However, this method of playtesting can only be implemented once a digital prototype is created. The methods of playtest can vary. Therefore, it is important to first identify the types of feedback data the game designers are seeking answers for. Here we identify the playtest criteria types, which aim to answer specific questions. Concept testing is where we are asking the questions if the game is playable. Scattershot testing is where we're looking to see if the game is enjoyable. Experience testing is where we're asking if the game is engaging and challenging. Stress testing is where we're asking the questions about balance, and accessibility testing is where we ask the questions regarding if the game is accessible. In other words, does it make sense and is it complete? These different types of playtests are conducted during different stages of the game production and can be administered separately or as a whole playtest, depending on the needs, timeline, and budget of the game production. Once the playtest is conducted, it is important to review and analyze the data. Every game production team will have their own method for evaluating the playtest data. The most prominent elements which the playtest data should identify are which elements of the game are most praised, which elements of the game are most disliked or confusing, what can you do to highlight or improve these elements? Each time a playtest is conducted, more data will help to illustrate a better picture of the direction the game is taken and whether or not the game is getting closer to achieving the intended experience goals. Regardless of what direction the game production team takes with the playtest data, this data should be valued and help the game production team as they move closer towards their goal of developing a game that meets their player experience goals. I hope you found this lesson informative, and don't forget to check out other lessons and tutorials on the channel. So what are you waiting for? Get creative today!